So here's our History of Landfills project. It's by Lena, Amelia, Michael, and Noah. So how was waste disposed of before landfills were created? Before any kind of landfill was created, most waste was disposed of in large pits. When full, the pits were covered with dirt or another material and left untouched. Whatever materials were in the pit would either decompose or stay underground forever. Pre-industrialization, waste in the United States was picked up by garbage collectors. This became common in the 1930s. Once collected, however, the waste was dumped in some unsustainable ways. These included ocean dumping, incineration, landfills, or dumping in other large bodies of water. Here we can see the pits that most waste was dumped into, and here we see garbage in a pile being incinerated. Describe the first recorded landfill in the United States. When and where was the first one? The very first sanitary landfill in the United States was the Fresno Municipal Sanitary Landfill. This landfill is located in Fresno, California, and opened up in 1939. And here is a picture. What is the Solid Waste Disposal Act? The Solid Waste Disposal Act is a bill passed in California in 1965. It was the first big law with the goal of altering waste management and disposal methods. It outlines any potential health or environmental effects that waste disposal methods have. It also states that by 2020, at least 75% of waste in California should be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. In 1976, the Act was revised to include newer waste disposal methods.
What is the Toxic Substances Control Act? The Toxic Substances Control Act allows for EPA to require all reportings, record-keeping, and testing restrictions to any chemical substances or mixtures. TSCA evaluates new and existing chemicals and all the risks that they would carry. Substances such as food, drugs, cosmetics, and pesticides are excluded from TSCA. By doing this, we are able to reduce the amount of pollution before it is even released into the environment. To help enforce these regulations, there are tons of programs in place meant to enforce TSCA. What is the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act? The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act is an act that allows for EPA to control hazardous waste materials. This would include the generation, transportation, treatment, storage, and disposal of all hazardous waste. This then reduces the amount of waste produced and put out into the environment. They work to protect human health and the environment by promoting the conservation of resources, ensuring proper waste management, preventing harmful exposure, and overseeing the cleanup of land for productive use. To impose these regulations, they implement regulatory standards, provide incentives, and collaborate with communities, governments, businesses, and organizations.
What is the Federal Resource Recovery Act? The RCRA was signed into law on October 21, 1976, to address the increasing problems the nation faced from our growing volume of municipal and industrial waste. RCRA was an amendment to the Solid Waste Disposal Act of 1965, which was the first statute that specifically focused on improving solid waste disposal methods. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, gives the EPA the authority to control hazardous waste from the beginning until the end of life. The 1986 amendments to the RCRA enabled EPA to address environmental problems that could result from underground tanks storing petroleum and other hazardous substances.
The Federal Hazardous and Solid Waste Amendments were made in 1984 to the RCRA. These amendments focus on minimizing the amount of waste and the phasing out land disposal of hazardous waste. They also focus on giving a corrective action for releases of hazardous waste. These amendments allowed for the EPA, which is the United States Environmental Protection Agency, to have more enforcement authority. Along with that, it created precise hazardous waste management standards and an underground storage tank program. The Medical Waste Tracking Act of 1988 was enacted after medical waste had washed up on the East Coast, which had caused public concern for health hazards. This act defined what medical waste is and said which medical wastes were subject to program regulations. It also created a cradle-to-grave tracking system, along with required management standards. These standards would be for segregation, packaging, labeling, marketing, and the storing of medical wastes. Lastly, it established a record system with detailed requirements and penalties for when medical wastes were mismanaged. A modern-day landfill is known as a sanitary landfill. These landfills are operated by layering garbage in a large hole in the ground. The deepest spots can reach up to 15 feet below the surface. The bottom of the landfill is lined with compacted clay so that nothing can seep through. There is also a drainage system since the waste can create liquid or because of weather conditions. A gas collection system is put into place to collect the methane from the trash as it decomposes. The trash itself is compacted and is placed into the hole with a layer of dirt/soil placed on top every day. Once the landfill is full of waste, it is capped with a liner of synthetic plastic, buried with at least 2 feet of soil, and then vegetation is planted.
How do landfills impact human health? Landfills contain toxic hydrogen sulfide in the air, causing coughing, irritation of the eyes, nose, throat, headache, nausea, and breathing difficulties. These effects usually go away once the exposure is stopped. The three most important problems with landfills are toxins, lactate, and greenhouse gases. Organic waste produces bacteria which break the rubbish down. The decaying rubbish produces weak acidic chemicals which combine with liquids in the waste to form lactate and landfill gases.